The mockery begins. Captain Thyra Vex stood on the observation deck of Nexus Training Station, watching the latest batch of recruits arrive through the massive docking bay. Her 4 arms crossed behind her back as she surveyed the incoming shuttles. With practiced eyes, standing 8 feet tall with crystalline skin that reflected the station's artificial lighting, she was the pride of the Krillian Empire's military elite. Her species had conquered 12 star systems and held dominance over the Eastern, spiral-armed for 3 centuries. The Galactic Defense Initiative had been formed just 2 years ago, bringing together the finest warriors from every major civilization to create an unstoppable force. Thyra had been handpicked to represent her people, and she took that responsibility seriously. She had trained with the best soldiers from the Zentari Federation, whose natural armor could deflect plasma fire. She had sparred with the Vorthic, whose telepathic abilities made them nearly unbeatable in combat. She had even worked alongside the mechanical Syntoids, whose precision and calculated movements were legendary. But today was different. Today, the humans were arriving. Thyra had read the files on humanity. A young species, barely 300 years into spaceflight. They came from a small blue planet on the outer rim, a world with such mild gravity that their bones were hollow compared to most spacefaring races. No natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced senses. They couldn't even see in multiple light spectrums like most civilized species. Their lifespan was laughably short, and their physical capabilities were among the lowest recorded in the Galactic database. The shuttle doors hissed open, and 20 humans stepped onto the station. Thyra's enhanced vision immediately cataloged their weaknesses. The tallest among them barely reached her chest. Their skin looked soft and easily damaged. They moved with careful, measured steps, clearly struggling with the station's enhanced gravity field. One of them, a man with dark hair and tired eyes, caught her attention. He wore the rank insignia of a lieutenant, and his uniform bore the simple designation A. Shun. Pathetic, Thyra muttered to herself. The Council must be desperate to accept such weak creatures. Commander Zolak, the station's Zentari administrator, approached with his usual formal gait. His scaled hide gleamed under the lights as he gestured toward the humans. Captain Vex, these are your new training partners. The Council has decided that all elite units must be integrated, regardless of species. Thyra's 4 eyes narrowed. Training partners? These creatures can barely walk in standard gravity. How are they supposed to keep up with real soldiers? Orders are orders, Captain. You will treat them as equals. The word equals tasted bitter in Thyra's mouth. She had seen equals. The Zentari could withstand direct hits from energy weapons. The Vorthic could read enemy thoughts before they formed. The Syntoids could calculate battle outcomes with mathematical precision. These humans looked like they would break if she breathed on them too hard. The first training session began within hours. The gymnasium was a vast space designed to accommodate multiple species, with variable gravity zones and environmental controls. Thyra watched as the humans struggled to adapt to the standard galactic fitness protocols. The strength test required lifting a 500-pound weight above one's head. Thyra hefted it easily with 2 arms, while keeping her other 2 crossed casually. Behind her back, the Zentari recruits managed it with some effort. The Vorthic used their telekinetic abilities to assist their physical strength. The humans failed completely. Lieutenant Shun managed to lift the weight to his chest before his arms gave out. The bar crashed to the floor with a loud clang that echoed through the gymnasium. Other alien species turned to look, and Thyra heard snickers from the Zentari group. Chun's face flushed red with embarrassment, but he immediately reset the weight and tried again, and failed again. Perhaps you should try the children's training area, called out Sergeant Koran, a Zentari whose natural arrogance rivaled Thyra's own. I believe they have weights more suitable for your capabilities. The other humans looked uncomfortable, but Sean simply nodded and said, "Thank you for the suggestion, Sergeant. I'll note that for future reference." Thera was surprised by the response. Most species would have either become aggressive or sulked in defeat. The human had simply accepted the insult and moved on. Strange. The speed trials were even more embarrassing for the humans. The course required running through a maze filled with obstacles while carrying a 100-pound pack. Thera completed it in 43 seconds, her crystalline skin barely showing signs of exertion. The Zentari averaged around 55 seconds. The Vorthik, despite their telepathic abilities, struggled with the physical demands and finished. Around 70 seconds. The humans took over 2 minutes. Sean was the fastest among them, completing the course in 2 minutes and 18 seconds. He was breathing heavily, sweat dripping from his forehead, but he had finished. As he crossed the finish line, he immediately turned to help another human who had fallen behind, a young woman who was clearly struggling with the weight of her pack. "Leave her," Thera called out. "Individual performance is what matters here." Sean looked at her with those tired eyes. "Not where I come from, Captain." He jogged back to help the woman, supporting half her pack's weight while encouraging her to keep moving. They finished together, dead last, but Chun looked more satisfied than any of the winners. The combat simulations were the most revealing. Each species brought their natural advantages to bear. Tyra's 4 arms allowed her to wield multiple weapons simultaneously, while her crystalline skin provided natural armor. The Zentari used their scales and raw strength to overpower opponents. The Vorthik relied on their telepathic abilities to predict and counterattacks before they happened. The humans had no such advantages. They moved slower, hit softer, and tired faster than everyone else. In the first simulation, a standard urban combat scenario, the human team was eliminated within minutes. Chun had tried to coordinate his team's movements, but without enhanced communication abilities or superior reflexes, they were easily outmaneuvered. "This is pointless," Thera announced to Commander Zolak after the 3rd day of training. "The humans are holding everyone back. They can't keep up with the physical demands. They have no natural combat abilities, and they're clearly not suited for elite military operations. The Council's decision stands, Captain. Continue the training." But Thyra wasn't the only one growing frustrated. The other alien species had begun to voice their complaints as well. During meal periods, she heard constant grumbling about the weak links in their teams. The Zentari openly mocked the humans' performance. The Vorthik, typically more reserved, expressed their concerns about mission success rates with humans involved. Even the logical syntoids had calculated that human inclusion reduced overall unit effectiveness by 37%. The humans seemed oblivious to the criticism, or perhaps they simply chose to ignore it. They continued to train with the eye. Same intensity, even though they consistently ranked at the bottom of every evaluation. Chun, in particular, fascinated Thyra. Despite his obvious limitations, he never appeared discouraged. He took notes after every session, studied the performance data, and worked longer hours than anyone else. "What are you writing?" Thyra asked one evening, finding Chun alone in the training facility long after others had retired. He looked up from his tablet, showing no surprise at her presence. "Observations. Trying to understand how to improve." "Improve what? Your species' fundamental limitations?" Chun set down his tablet and met her gaze directly. "Every species here has natural advantages, but advantages can become weaknesses if you rely on them too heavily. I'm looking for patterns, gaps in your tactics that we might be able to exploit." Thera laughed, a sound like crystal chimes. "You think you can find weaknesses in species that have dominated the galaxy for centuries? I think everyone has weaknesses. The question is whether you're willing to acknowledge them." It was an interesting perspective, though Thyra dismissed it as human naivety. What could these fragile creatures possibly teach species that had been perfecting warfare since before humans discovered fire? The answer came during the 5th day of training. The exercise was designed to test adaptability under pressure. Teams were dropped into a simulated alien environment with limited resources and tasked with surviving for 24 hours while completing specific objectives. The environment was hostile, with extreme temperatures, toxic atmosphere, and limited visibility. Each team received basic equipment, but success required improvisation and creative problem-solving. Thyra's mixed team included herself, 2 Zentari, 1 Vorthic, and Lieutenant Chun. She had specifically requested to be paired with the human, curious to see how he would perform in a real challenge. The simulation began at dawn, and within hours, Thyra understood why the humans had been failing so consistently. The environment was brutal. Thyra's natural armor protected her from the worst effects, and her enhanced strength allowed her to carry heavy equipment without strain. The Centauri used their scales to shield themselves from the toxic atmosphere. The Vorthic relied on their telepathic abilities to sense dangers before they became visible. Chun had none of these advantages. His breathing apparatus was bulky and cumbersome. His protective suit was thick and limiting. He moved slowly and carefully, clearly struggling with the hostile conditions. But he never complained. Instead, he did something unexpected. He began modifying his equipment, using materials scavenged from the environment. Shun jury-rigged improvements to his gear. He created a more efficient air filtration system using plant fibers and mineral deposits. He modified his suit's joints to improve mobility. He even fashioned a primitive but effective communications device using salvaged components. "How did you know to do that?" Thyra asked, watching him work. "Necessity," Chun replied simply. "When you don't have natural advantages, you learn to create artificial ones." But the real surprise came when their team encountered the simulation's primary challenge, a massive storm system that grounded all conventional transportation and communication. The other teams had taken shelter and were waiting for the storm to pass. Chun suggested they use the storm to their advantage. "Everyone else will be hiding," he explained. "We can complete our objectives while they're waiting for better conditions." "The storm is too dangerous," protested one of the Centauri. "We should wait like the others." Chun shook his head. "Dangerous, yes, but not impossible. We just need to think differently." He outlined a plan that was both audacious and brilliant. Instead of fighting the storm, they would use its energy to power their equipment. Instead of avoiding the lightning, they would use it to illuminate their path. Instead of waiting for the winds to die down, they would use them to aid their movement. It was insane. It was reckless. It was completely against standard military doctrine. It worked perfectly. Thyra found herself following Chun's lead as they navigated through the storm. His modifications to their equipment proved invaluable. His understanding of the environment allowed them to move safely through areas that would have been impassable for other teams. His creative solutions turned every obstacle into an opportunity. They completed their objectives in record time, while other teams were still taking shelter. When the simulation ended, their performance scores were the highest recorded in the exercise's history. "Impossible," muttered one of the Centauri instructors. There must be an error in the calculations, but there was no error. The humans had not only kept up with the elite alien soldiers, they had surpassed them. And they had done it without any of the natural advantages that other species took for granted. Thyra stared at the results display, her 4 arms hanging loose at her sides. Everything she thought she knew about combat effectiveness had been challenged in a single day. The humans hadn't won through superior strength or speed or natural weaponry. They had won through something far more dangerous, the ability to adapt. and overcome any obstacle placed in their path. For the first time since arriving at the station, Thera began to wonder if she had underestimated these strange, soft creatures. From the outer rim, the Awakening, the next morning brought an unexpected announcement. Commander Zolak's voice echoed through the station's communication system, his usual formal tone carrying a note of urgency that made everyone stop what they were doing. All training personnel report to emergency stations. This is not a drill. We have received distress signals from the outer perimeter. Pirate vessels have been detected approaching the station. Thyra's blood turned to ice. The Nexus training station was supposed to be impregnable, protected by the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy. But pirates had grown bolder in recent years, and some of the larger fleets had acquired military-grade weapons through black market channels. Within minutes, the station's corridors filled with the organized chaos of emergency response. Thera rushed to the command center, where holographic displays showed the approaching threat. 12 pirate vessels, heavily armed and moving in attack formation. Their estimated time of arrival was 43 minutes. Status report, Thera demanded as she entered the command center. Commander Zelek's scaled hide had turned a pale blue, indicating stress. Our main defensive grid is offline for scheduled maintenance. We have minimal weapons capabilities and no way to raise the full shield array. The nearest military fleet is 6 hours away. What about evacuation? Not possible. The pirates have jammed our long-range communications and are blocking all exit routes. We're trapped. Thera felt her 4 hearts racing. This was exactly the kind of situation her training had prepared her for, but the odds were overwhelming. The station held nearly 3,000 people, including civilians, researchers, and administrative personnel. Most were non-combatants who had never seen real combat. We need to organize defensive positions, she said, falling back on standard military protocol. Set up choke points at major corridors, establish overlapping fields of fire, and prepare for boarding actions. Already in progress, replied Major Koreth, the Centauri security chief. I've deployed our best soldiers to primary defensive positions. We should be able to hold them off until reinforcements arrive. But Thera noticed something troubling. The alien soldiers, despite their training and natural advantages, were moving with mechanical precision. They followed standard protocols. Exactly, setting up defensive positions that any competent military strategist would expect. There was no creativity, no adaptation to the unique circumstances of the station's layout. It was then that she noticed the humans. While the other species organized themselves into traditional defensive formations, the humans were doing something completely different. Lieutenant Chun had gathered his people into small groups and was giving them what appeared to be non-military assignments. Some were heading toward the civilian quarters, others toward the engineering sections, and still others toward areas that had no strategic value whatsoever. What are you doing? Thera demanded, approaching Chun as he finished briefing his team. Preparing for the real fight, he replied, checking his equipment with practiced efficiency. The real fight will be at the defensive positions. Your people should be supporting the main battle lines. Chun shook his head. The defensive positions are obvious. Any decent pirate fleet will expect them and plan accordingly. We need to think like the attackers, not the defenders. Before Thera could respond, the station shuddered as the first pirate vessels opened fire. The lights flickered, and emergency klaxons began blaring throughout the complex. Through the viewports, she could see the attacking ships moving into position, their weapon systems charging for a full assault. They're targeting the docking bays, reported a Syntoid technician. Standard boarding tactics. They'll disable our ability to launch escape pods and breach the hull at multiple points. Predictable, muttered Chun. Major Koreth, how many soldiers do you have guarding the docking bays? 57 of our best warriors, the Centauri replied proudly. They won't get through. Chun looked skeptical. They're not trying to get through. They're trying to draw your attention. As if to prove his point, explosions erupted from the station's lower levels. The pirates hadn't targeted the docking bays for invasion. They had used them as a distraction, while their real assault teams breached the hull in unexpected locations. Impossible, breathed Major Koreth. Our sensors showed no activity in those sectors. They're using the station's own structure against us, Chun explained. Old mining. Charges, probably. Set them off in the right places, and you can create new entry points while making it look like system failures. The command center erupted in chaos as reports flooded in from across the station. Pirate boarding parties were advancing through corridors that should have been secure. But carefully planned defensive positions were being bypassed entirely. Civilian areas were under attack, and the alien soldiers were struggling to respond to threats they hadn't anticipated. We need to fall back to secondary positions, Major Koreth ordered, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. No, Chun said firmly. We need to change the game entirely. He activated his communication device, speaking in rapid, clipped tones to his scattered team members. Phoenix Protocol is now active. All units begin Phase 1. Thyra had never heard of Phoenix Protocol, but she was about to learn what it meant. The first sign that something had changed came from the engineering section. The station's artificial gravity, which had been running at standard galactic levels, suddenly fluctuated. Pirates who had been advancing confidently through the corridors found themselves stumbling as the gravity shifted unpredictably. Those wearing heavy armor, designed for standard conditions, became clumsy and slow. The humans are manipulating the environmental systems, reported a Synthoid monitor. They're using the station's own infrastructure as a weapon. But that was just the beginning. Emergency blast doors, which should have sealed to contain the pirate incursion, instead opened and closed in seemingly random patterns. The pirates found themselves herded into specific areas without realizing they were being guided. The station's lighting systems flickered on and off, creating confusion and disorientation among the attackers. Brilliant, Thyra whispered, understanding dawning in her mind. They're not fighting the invasion. They're controlling it. The second phase of Phoenix Protocol became apparent when the first pirate team reached the civilian quarters. Instead of finding helpless non-combatants, they encountered a maze of improvised obstacles and traps. The humans had reorganized the entire civilian evacuation, turning it into a defensive strategy that used the station's own layout against the attackers. But the most impressive display came when a group of heavily armed pirates cornered Chun himself in a maintenance corridor. Gyra watched through security feeds as 20 pirates, armed with military-grade weapons and wearing powered armor, advanced on the human lieutenant. Chun was alone, lightly armed, and had nowhere to run. What happened next defied every tactical manual Thyra had ever studied. Instead of surrendering or making a desperate last stand, Chun did something completely unexpected. He began dismantling the corridor's maintenance panels, working with incredible speed and precision. Within seconds, he had rerouted power conduits, redirected atmospheric systems, and turned the corridor itself into a weapon. The pirates' powered armor, designed to protect against energy weapons and physical attacks, became a liability when Chun flooded the corridor with electromagnetic interference. Their targeting systems failed, their communications were jammed, and their servo-assisted movements became sluggish and unpredictable. In the confusion, Chun moved like a ghost, using the corridor's own structure as cover and weapon. He redirected steam vents to create concealment, used gravity manipulation to throw the pirates off balance, and turned their own weapons against them by causing system malfunctions. Within minutes, all 20 pirates were unconscious or incapacitated. And Chun was already moving to his next objective. How is this possible? Thyra demanded, staring at the security feeds in disbelief. Humans adapt, replied a voice behind her. She turned to see Dr. Sarah Kim, one of the human researchers, standing at a control console. We don't have your natural advantages, so we learn to use everything else. But the tactical complexity, the coordination required ... We've been planning this since the first day of training, Dr. Kim explained. Alex knew that standard. Military doctrine wouldn't work for us, so we developed our own. The battle continued for 6 more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt after the first 20 minutes. The pirates, despite their superior firepower and numbers, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. They couldn't adapt to the constantly changing conditions the humans created. Their standard tactics became useless when the environment itself was weaponized against them. More importantly, the humans never stopped moving. Even when injured, even when overwhelmed, they continued to adapt and overcome. Thyra watched in amazement as wounded humans jury-rigged medical equipment to keep fighting. She saw them create weapons from maintenance supplies and coordinate complex maneuvers using nothing but hand signals and improvised communication devices. The most remarkable moment came when the pirate flagship attempted to ram the station in a desperate final assault. The impact would have been catastrophic, potentially killing everyone aboard. Chun and his team had anticipated even this possibility. They had spent hours preparing the station's emergency systems, not just for evacuation, but for controlled destruction. In the seconds before impact, they triggered a series of precisely calculated explosions that destabilized the pirate ships. Approach trajectory. Instead of a devastating collision, the ship glanced off the station's hull and tumbled into space, its weapon systems offline and its crew unconscious from the unexpected gravitational forces. When the dust settled, the pirate fleet was either destroyed or fleeing. The station had suffered damage, but casualties were minimal. The human protocols had not just saved the day, they had redefined what was possible in defensive warfare. Thyra found Chun in the medical bay, where he was helping treat wounded civilians. His uniform was torn, his face was bruised, and his left arm was in a temporary sling. But he was still working, still helping, still moving forward. How? She asked simply. Chun looked up from the patient he was treating. How what? How did you know? How did you plan for something like this? How did you coordinate such a complex operation with no advanced communication systems? Chun smiled, and for the first time, Thyra saw something dangerous in that expression. Not the physical danger of claws or fangs or natural weapons, but something far more threatening to those who underestimated it. We've been underestimated. Before, he said quietly. By species, by environments, by circumstances that should have killed us. We learned that the only way to survive is to never give up, no matter how impossible the situation seems. But your people were exhausted, injured, outnumbered, ... And we kept going anyway. That's what humans do. We don't stop because something is difficult. We don't surrender because the odds are against us. We adapt, we overcome, and we never quit. Thyra felt something shift in her understanding of the universe. She had always believed that strength came from physical power, natural weapons, evolved advantages. But the humans had shown her something different. They had demonstrated that true strength came from the refusal to accept defeat, no matter what the circumstances. I owe you an apology, she said, her 4 arms hanging loose at her sides. No, Chen replied, returning to his patient. You owe me nothing. But maybe now you understand why the council wanted us here. Thyra did understand. The humans weren't weak. They were the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. Not because of what they could do, but because of what they would never stop trying to do. They would never surrender, never give up, Never accept that a situation was impossible. They were unbreakable. Later that night, as the station's emergency systems hummed quietly around them, Thyra stood again on the observation deck. But this time, she wasn't alone. Chun joined her, his injured arm still in its sling, but his eyes as alert and determined. As ever. "The other species are talking," Thyra said quietly. "They want to know how humans developed such tactics." "And what are you telling them?" "That they're asking the wrong question. It's not about how you developed those tactics. It's about why you never stopped trying to develop them." Chun nodded approvingly. "Now you're beginning to understand. I spent my entire life believing that strength was about physical power. But you've shown me that real strength is about never giving up, no matter how impossible things seem." "Physical power is useful," Chun agreed. "But it's not everything. The strongest warrior can be defeated if they rely only on their natural advantages. The weakest can become unbeatable if they refuse to accept defeat." Thyra looked out at the stars, thinking about all the battles she had won through superior strength and natural weapons. For the first time, she wondered how many more she could have won if she had learned to think like a human. "Will you teach me?" she asked. Chun smiled. "I thought you'd never ask." As they stood together on the observation deck, Thyra realized that her understanding of warfare, of strength, of what it meant to be a warrior, had been forever changed. The humans had taught her that true power didn't come from natural advantages or superior technology. It came from an unbreakable spirit that refused to accept defeat under any circumstances. She had learned to respect the humans not because they were strong, but because they were unbreakable. And in a galaxy full of wars and conflicts, that might be the most dangerous trait of all. Asterisk.